G'day everybody, welcome to another Step Outside podcast. My name is Paul Burt. Hope you've had a fantastic week, and if you've been watching our show Step Outside with Paul Burt, you would have noticed our latest show was all about fishing a runoff. Now, we were targeting a different species of fish, but another fish decided to show up and we did our whole shoot on it. Now, one thing you may have noticed as well, when I do go away and do our fishing show, is I tend to take a few mates with us because we like to have a good time, at the same time teaching you guys different experiences so the knowledge of power increases tenfold. Great way to do it. Now, this next bloke, his name is Fish Guy, aka Timmy Harris. And of course, with his company on board, we tend to show and share a lot of different knowledge. He does one style of fishing. I like to do a different style. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Timmy Harris. Mate, thanks for joining us today, buddy. Good to have you on board.
No problems, mate. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, mate, you know, a lot of people sort of love to watch our program and yeah, we got a great response and feedback from you joining us because you're a wealth of knowledge. Mate, and I thought today this is a day to bring you on board because the recent fishing trip we did was something that I have never encountered. Now, I've caught a plethora of fish in my life, and I know you've caught a ton load as well. But this is something that I've never experienced before. And, mate, what about you? Have you ever experienced catching 2 kilogram size mullet, mouth hooked on a live mullet, Zerek? Have you ever done that?
No. I have caught mullet on lures before, and it was on a full moon, and it was in landlocked lakes here on the Gold Coast, and I was catching them on surface poppers, which I found I was going for giant herring, and I ended up getting mullet, and I caught 4 or 5 that night on the full moon, on the high tide. But, mate, the experience we had in the runoff was just crazy. My first hookup, you were there. You were standing next to me. It was 100%. I was all in on a big mangrove jack because this thing hit, slammed it, and ran and went deep. And then next minute I pull up and it's an elbow slapping, or should I say a knee slapping mullet. And like we're all just laughing and carrying on because it was just unbelievable.
I've never seen anything like this before because, look, I'll paint the picture for people who are listening, is that we were fishing a runoff. We had half a metre of rain in southeast Queensland and a lot of these causeways overflow from these landlocked areas. And, of course, with that, we see a lot of fish coming over and we see a good variety of fish as well. But I've never seen mullet. We were catching or targeting barramundi. Yes, you get them here. A lot of people know about it. Mangrove jacks, jewfish, trevally, but not mullet. And these mullet, like you say, Timmy, they're the size of your arm, mate. They're freaking huge.
Yeah, incredible. And you know, we catch the first one, and I thought, okay, you know, this is fishing. Yeah. Things happen. You go, yeah, we can catch one, but then, you know, three casts later, catch another one. And then we got another one.
I told my cameraman to turn the camera. I said, I don't want to see mullet. Who wants to watch mullet being caught? Okay. Yeah, we did jag 1 or 2 because, you know, there was a severe runoff there. It was flowing at 55 knots. The water was racing over. And we did get a couple like that. But, mate, the rest of them, when we started hooking them in the mouth, we told Jack, mate, you need to film this. You need to record this because this is something that we've never experienced as two, I believe, accomplished anglers who are still learning, but has anyone else done it? So, mate, I'm putting it out there. This is incredible.
Oh, it is. And at the end of the day, like you hit the nail on the head just then, learning. Like we have been around, we've caught a fair few fish in our life, we've caught just about one of everything. But when you know, that's the beauty of fishing. You just learn. Every time you go, you learn something. And every time you go with someone else, you learn something different, you know, and it's incredible.
I've never caught a Patagonian toothfish.
No, well, we'll have to go over there one day. Let's take the show over there. We'll go and get one.
I think we've eaten one before. I'm not sure. But anyway, mate, there's a whole heap of variety of things. Mate, the lures we were using, I mean, that was quite unbelievable as well because we're using a live mullet, as in the lure, the live mullet, to target mullet, really. And they were big.
Yeah, like, you know, we're all using different colours, and I was using the red fin colour, which, you know, if the viewers out there haven't seen it or the listeners out there haven't seen it, you know, Google your Zerek Live Mullets in your 4.5 inch and you'll see the R. And R stands for red fin. It's got stripes on it. It's a funny looking colour, a bit of a green sort of a colour with some red fins and bits and pieces. Yeah. But we think that one worked, or we came to the conclusion, because that one caught about 10 fish, and the other colours that we were using, like dark ale and olive guppy and the other ones we tried, only caught a few. So,
they're the ones I was using.
I know.
I'm putting it down. I'm putting it down for the colours as well, not experience.
Yeah, but there's a bit of fish guy in there as well. Like, it's, the talent comes into it as well, but not just lure colour. So, it's not your fault, Paul, that you were using a colour that didn't work as good as mine. But we won't say that on air, will we?
Mate, I had an ugly lure on. That's all I can say. Hey, mate, when we're talking about, fishing floodwaters, the first thing that comes to mind is danger. Okay, so we've got to be fully aware of where we're fishing, the surrounds. Tell us some of the things that you've got to keep an eye out there, Timmy, if you're fishing a floodwater runoff, so to speak.
Look, the first one that comes to mind is it's very easy to see the water is travelling extremely quick.
Yeah.
And if you ever fall into that, there is no use swimming against it. You just got to go with it down the creek, and you'll go a kilometre in no time at all. Yeah. Something that really comes to mind when I'm standing there, often or not, we're standing along the rocks, along the edge of where these overflows are and these drains are, and you can see the water at your feet rise up and down, and it changes quickly. 10 minutes time, it might drop 10 or so centimetres, and then as the tide comes in, the pressure of the tide moving in with the floodwaters moving out raises it up quite a lot, and that can be, within half an hour where you're standing could be a foot underwater very quickly.
Yeah, you got to be super careful. What fish eat the bait that comes out of there? Like, what sort of fish are we talking about? Around sort of, I guess the mid reaches of Australia. We're going pretty much draw a line from the Gold Coast across the other side of the country and take it south. What are we sort of seeing in those areas, mate?
What you're going to see more of, like in my personal experience of fishing those areas, I've caught more big trevally and big mangrove jacks than just about anything else. Yes, we can catch barramundi, and they're rare to catch. You can have a million casts and you might catch one. I know people who have been fishing for them for years and not caught one. But mangrove jack and trevally, and the trevally are amazing because you'll see them come up the river, and you'll see them come into schools of the mullet that are trying to get up into the fresh water, and just smash through them. So that'd be my two top target species of those areas. And
then as those mullets start to move out to the entrance, we see a different variety of fish, the mulloway, come through and target the mullet. And generally it's that, like a slap on the surface as the mulloway come through and take the mullet. And it's a great thing to do, quite visual at times, but also can be very dangerous, particularly at the entrance to these rivers, because all of this fresh water has got to flow somewhere. And not only does it attract mulloway, but also the toothy critters, the shark.
Oh, the tax man. He's always there.
He is, isn't he? And the rocks become slippery due to the fresh water as well, so you can easily lose your footing.
Totally.
You've got to be careful. Got to be careful. Hey, mate, another experience that I've had with you was fishing far north Queensland, fishing the Northern Territory, fishing the barrages. That's another runoff, isn't it?
Oh, it's look, it is the number one runoff. Anywhere up that area, like the Northern Territory, and all the rivers and creeks up there are just incredible. We were lucky enough to go up there with your show, and we fished with real screaming barra fishing. And Jared, who runs that, he runs out of Shady Camp, and that was quite an astonishing place for me because I'd never been there before, and to fish those areas with him was just incredible.
Mate, it's a very dangerous spot when you start talking the territory or the Cape or anything, because we have that predator that is just the number one in my book, because you don't see it, the crocodile, and there's a shitload of them up there. You got to admit that.
Oh, mate, the Mary River at Shady Camp.
Had a few of those
Shady
there.
Camp.
Yeah.
I've had a few of them up there, and the Mary River in itself, like just talking to Jared, I think it was like 15 to 20 crocodiles per kilometre of river up there. It's the highest population of crocs in the Northern Territory. So, like, it's a dangerous spot. You don't want to fall in there or go for a swim, that's for sure.
Goodness no. And the thing is, you don't really see them. You see one, you see a little bit of a swirl here and there. You look out and you might see that looks like a stick, just the eyes of a stick, you know what I mean? Like the two little bumps. And that could be 15 foot of croc sitting just under the water. And I remember seeing that big one. Remember that big thing that came up?
Fang. His name was Fang. It was as big as the boat. Like it looked like
huge.
a gum tree floating down the river with a set of eyes on it. God.
He did, mate. And I remember the story I was being told by someone up there. Can't remember who. Actually, I do, but I'm not going to say. Is that the Fang, I think it was, came out, leaned over the back of the boat, and munched on the driver's seat. The driver was actually at the front of the boat at the time. So these crocs are getting really, really close, and I think that's a major concern for people up there, particularly if they're you get the southerners coming up and they just clean the fish at the local boat ramp, chuck the frames out because they're buggering off back south in the next week, maybe.
You know what? My biggest advice.
Yeah,
mate. My biggest advice to anyone that goes up to the Mary River: take a bigger boat. Like we were there, and we saw a couple of dudes. Seriously, remember that guy in like a 12-foot tinny with a 7 horsepower outboard on the back of it and a sun visor. And like, look, we commend him on going out and having a fish and getting out, stepping outside and having some fun. But
we didn't commend him, mate. We cheersed him with a can of 4X as he went past. We went, "Cheers, good on you, mate." And tell us what it's like on the other side.
All I can hope that he got back to the ramp okay, but yeah, no thanks. Go in a big boat with high sides, and the big crocs will leave you alone. That's fine. And
go with a guide on the first day, because the guide's going to show you where they catch the fish, and you can easily work it out anyway. But what sort of lures would you use up in that area up there? Because the runoff that you see, particularly coming into April as the end of the wet season into May, it's pretty good fishing. But, the lures and some of the runoffs there, Timmy, because some of the areas we fished fresh water, you realistically, you could have peed harder than a lot of that runoff coming out of some of those little drains. And they're holding fish.
Yeah, it was quite surprising how little amount of water was needed. Like some of the areas we were pulling barra out of, and they weren't, metre plus fish, but they were at that 700, 800, 850, and we were catching them on just about everything from our, from some squidgies and rubber tails, the 100 millimetre sort of size, to hard bodies. And then my favourite was some of the surface lures was epic. To chuck a surface lure into those little shallow 1 metre deep drains, and the barra are popping and smashing behind the lure as you're bringing it out. Yes, you don't hook as many, but spectacular.
And it certainly was, because I know we were fishing these runoffs in the sense of it looked like the Everglades. You had all this, bushy reeds and grass, and it looked pretty good. And it's just these little drains of water that might have opened up to, say, 5 to 10 feet wide, and then it sort of narrowed in amongst the grass. And there was a rock barrage there with a little bit of water, and we were all lined up along that because you thought, geez, it's a nice day to go for a swim. Lo and behold, there's a big crocodile sitting right there, you don't know. But the barra, man, they just stack up. Those chase bait live, those mullets, they were pretty cool, weren't they? The drunken mullet.
Yeah, the drunken mullet with the prop on the back as well was incredible, And my favourite was when we were up in the freshwater side, because of the big barrage up there at Shady Camp. One side, towards the north is the salt water, and then towards the south is all the freshwater. And when you go up into the fresh, I just love those lilies. As you say, it's like the Everglades. You're cruising through the fresh water. There's massive lilies everywhere, big as anything. And in between them, you're trying to pull barramundi out in between. And to throw the Zerek frogs, the 4-inch frog, was epic.
Man.
Like, to me, that is the epitome of fishing. The soft water, soft plastics in the fresh water on the surface, and those frogs, moving them through the reeds and lilies and stuff with a barramundi just munching them. Even if you don't hook up, you get 4 or 5 hits on the way out. That's a rush. That is a rush. That's awesome.
It was out of control, realistically, and even using some of the shrimp patterns in the squidgies, I found they to be absolutely brilliant. And putting some S-factor goop on the actual lure also helped with the fish hanging onto the lure even longer, because sometimes with the plastic they'll grab the placky and they'll pull it back because they've got 10 times stretch, half of the all the plastics do these days, and just to get that little bit more grip for the fish to hang on a bit longer. I found the S-factor goop was it worked really well for me. It worked well anyway.
Well, it did, and we proved it with the tarpon. Like, we caught heaps of tarpon up there, and as the sun would get higher in the morning, and you get to that 8 or 9 o'clock, the tarpon would sort of shut down a little bit. And on our way in between each fishing spot, mate, the goop on the lure, mate, the tarpon would hit it 9 times out of 10 with the scent on it rather than not. So, for me, that was easy to prove. Yeah.
Using the freshwater side, the wrigglers, again, squidgy, I'm going to talk about these lures. The squidgies work well. You get them up to 100, 110 mil, whatever it is, because the tail would really sort of vibrate away. And those, and like you said, the surface frogs, all that sort of stuff fired up. But when we went into the salt water and we hit some of those drains and barrages downstream from the weir at Shady Camp, I was using more the squidgy fish up to 150 millimeters because it had that sort of block paddle tail that gave it more of a mullet appearance, because there were a lot of Popeye mullet and diamond scar mullet in that area that the bigger barras and jacks and everything were munching on.
And I think also they can find that vibration a bit more. It's a bit more of a thud, 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 thud vibration in that dirtier water. In the salt water, as it's running off, you get that dirty water. So, I think that's a big factor of the barra feeling that vibration, and they're just chasing it down and slamming it.
Mate, you remember that little area where the water was flowing out through the sort of like a canal system, but it wasn't. It was, in the middle of nowhere. But they had that rock bar with a drain that was literally about 3 feet wide. Yeah. And one side of the river, the Mary, was basically about 2 feet taller than the other side. And as the tide dropped, the waters would level out. One would go higher, one would go lower. So the water was flowing into that canal system or the river. And on the other side, it would turn as the tide dropped away. And, of course, that's when you'd start to get fish over there too. That was a pretty cool spot. Lots of fish.
It was a cool spot, but a scary spot, because either side we're standing on this barrage, basically, which is about 1.5 meters wide. Yeah. And one side you've got, salty crocodiles having a crack at you, and then the other side you've got the same. So it was, for me it was every sense in my body was at 1,000% looking around me as you're casting. But amazing spot, incredible.
And we did some fly fishing, and that was another method of catching barras in that runoff. Yeah,
well, to be honest, that's the first time I've fly fished for barra, and fly fishing with a little popper on the surface was amazing. Like I will remember that for a long, long time.
Yeah, cool stuff up there, mate. I'll tell you what. Mate, now we'll jump back down sort of anywhere in Australia where you can have the dam runoffs, because dam runoffs is another runoff, okay? We've covered the impoundment areas where that goes freshwater into saltwater, but now the dams, etc. How does that travel for runoff fishing? I mean, I know you do quite well at this.
Yeah, well, like even from around our area here on the Gold Coast, we've got Hinds Dam, which is in the wonderful Hinds land. It's a 20-minute drive just about from anywhere near the Gold Coast, and it fishes extremely well. We've got amazing bass in there, and for my liking, I like stalking Saratoga. I do a lot of kayak fishing out there, but also there's some areas that you can access by foot. Some areas you can't. It's against the rules out there, but other areas is totally fine. And with the runoff situation, what I've found over the years of fishing, I've been here on the coast for 20 years now, and I've really learned a pattern of when the dam gets a lot of runoff in flood time, and the dam rises up and goes and starts to flow over. So instead of being at 100%, like it was recently, we had 500 mil of rain, and it got up to like 112, 114% full. And so what happens is all the water pushes up into the trees and the land all around the dam. So now you have this whole area which has never been underwater, and the Saratoga really like to push up into those areas, and you can walk the bank and fish surface for them, and it's exciting stuff.
What are you looking for, Timmy? Like if you're stalking the fish across the surface, the idea is for them not to see you. Colour, clothing, what should you wear?
Look, I have experimented a few times with different coloured clothing. I always wear long gear now, and I always wear dark colours and things that will sort of semi-blend into the background, because I have really noticed, I guess, for the guys down south who chase trout, it's a similar situation where you're stalking along the bank and you're waiting to see movement. Saratoga don't really sit still for too long. They're always just looking around to feed, and I always go at low light situations, so dawn and dusk. I don't bother doing it in the middle of the day, but you'll see water movement where the toga are sitting. And if I did wore a long shirt a while ago which had bright yellow on it, and I couldn't catch a fish. Every time I got anywhere close to a fish, they'd balk and fly away, and you'd see a huge explosion in the water and they'd take off. But so dark colours. The better you're making yourself invisible to them, it'll be you come up with a fish.
What about lures, mate? Are you trying to emulate what the fish are feeding on? If they're feeding on frogs or insects or crickets or something, because that recent rain has pushed down off the banks there, Timmy, and the fish are up there feeding on whatever's just been smothered by water. So what sort of lures do you recommend?
I primarily use weedless stuff, but I use a bit bigger, say around that 80 to 100 mil walk the dog style lures as well. They seem to go quite good on the first, say, week or two of it being flooded, but as it starts to recede a little bit, I find because you get closer to that grass, closer to the bush and the sticks, weedless setups work well. So I do use paddle tail lures with no weight. So I use a Gamakatsu size 2 sort of hook, 2.0, and no weight at all. So it's just you just want to fish that top of the water. Also use Zerek, my frogs. Frogs are killer up there. They're really good on the toga.
They are your favourite ones, mate. Fishing before a storm fishing leading up to it, the barometer's starting to rise. It gets really hot and muggy. It's been feeding that system, and then the storm hits. Obviously, electrical storms most of the time, and then the barometer drops, temperature drops, fish go off the bite. But right on that peak time is ideal, but it's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And to be honest, I've been caught out a couple of times where you get those really hot, stinking, muggy days, a little bit of a northerly blowing, sucking into the south where the storms are building. And it can be really good fishing. I have had it at times where I've caught nothing. Obviously, it's called fishing, but for a reason. But I've had some epic times of the build up to a storm, but you've got to get out of there before it becomes a bit too dangerous with those sparks. Graphite, carbon fibre rods and sparks are a perfect recipe to get yourself lit up. So, stay away from that.
And generally downstream from a dam wall is another spot that's pretty good as well. I do recall a Wonga dam with all the water flowing over that wall at one stage. That the river below the dam wall was home to metre plus barramundi, where people normally wouldn't fish, but they were catching a lot of them. And the same with a lot of other dams, even up around Somerset, Wivenhoe. We're talking the Hinds Dam is the below the wall. If you can start in a point where you can legally get in there with a kayak and then move upstream and hit those holes, that's a great way to target good quality Australian native species.
Well, I think what it does is it increases your chances to catch some good fish, purely under the basis of when there is runoff, when there is flood rain, fish move upstream to breed. And to go to a different part of the river. With bass go out to breed out near the saltwater and the brackish water in winter, but depending on what time of year it is, fish keep pushing up the stream. Also, if it's been dry for a while, like we've had a long time at the moment over the last few years, many parts in Australia that's been in drought. And then when you get these flooding rains, the fish go up the stream. So if you can get on any focal point of the river, a barrage or where a dam is below a dam, the fish are going to be more congregated in those spots. So your chances of catching something is increased.
Mate, when it comes to runoffs, wherever you are fishing, if there's a tidal movement, you're going to have water flow. Now, that's another runoff, isn't it? Such as sandbanks, because sandbanks, you get them all around the country, or a rock wall or whatever it might be. But if there's tidal influence, you do get a very similar effect, and the fish come and flourish in those regions as well.
Yeah, well, it's a focal point. So, wherever you've got tides, you've got everyday runoff. So everyday runoffs can be a drain, like living here in the city on the Gold Coast. We have many, many drains, pipe drains that feed inland lakes. We have developments that have small drains that come out of them. All of those on the going out tide is a runoff. So you're going to get, your surface fish like your GTs and your trevally and stuff hanging around those areas, your giant trevally, and also your giant herring. And then even when you go out on the flats, if you go out on the flats, each sand area has runoff. So you might have, on one big sand flat, you might have 10 different runoff spots that you can go and chase your bread and butter fish like your brim and your flathead. They're going to be wherever water runs off, that's where they're going to be because the bait is going to be running off those flats.
It's a prime example. A few weeks ago, I was doing my Channel 7 weather from just from a normal park in the Nerang River on the bank. And we had torrential rain that just bucketed down for literally half an hour, and I reckon we got 4 inches. It was a hell of a lot. You'd probably call it 8. I'd call it 4. But, mate, what happened was I went down and stood next to the rock wall there where I was about to do my cross, and I could hear this, the water flowing out of this pipe, running onto the rocks and into the river, and then you'd hear this boof, 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 boof. And the trevally and the brim, probably a few jacks in there as well, smashing up the bait fish that were congregating around that runoff as it pushed in, because they're after the food. It's a food chain. It's a simple and a perfect example of a runoff that happens by nature, and that is just a simple bit of rain falling out of a pipe.
Yeah, and where we are here, like, we get a lot of small prawns, and often or not, when you do get those, thunderstorms and things that produce, 4 inches or 8 inches in my scale, that'll push prawns out of all those little tiny gutters and drains that are all everywhere. And it's not areas that you're actually visually seeing. Like, a lot of these pipes go up and under all the infrastructure. So just because it's underground doesn't mean there's no fish there. But that's where all the bait and all the prawns and everything else live. So when you get a flush out from an afternoon storm, just after the storm is passed, that is prime time. And we've seen that time and time again, of exactly the situation that you've just described. That as soon as that water comes out of them pipes anywhere, you've got fish. They're there.
So what sort of gear should we be using? Okay, so someone wants to go out there and go, right, I'm going to have a crack at this. I've got a 10 to 15 kilo spin stick. I'm going to put on a 100-pound leader, and I'm going to flick an 8-inch popper. Well, that ain't going to work in certain areas. Probably a lot of the areas it won't. So you need to go more finesse. What do you sort of suggest as an all-rounder that's going to tick the boxes for everyone?
I use like a 6 or 7 foot rod. I often use Shimano CI4. I love them. I run 10 pound on that, so I can just about stop all your bread and butter fish. Yeah. If I'm going a little bit heavier, I just go to a 4,000 size reel instead of a 2,000 or 2,500 size reel, and I run 20 pound. If you're running 20 pound with 30 pound leader, you can pretty much, fish any of the runoff stuff that we do. And if you're going out onto the sand flats and you're fishing the everyday runoff, for your brim and your flathead, you can go right down. You go back down to your 6 and 8 pound gear with maybe 10 pound leader max and have some fun. Go light.
Yeah, I do love using the bait casters, particularly the Corrado 150HG DC. That's a digitally controlled unit, and matching that with
digitally controlled, because that helps you cast like an absolute champion, doesn't it?
You don't tell anyone. That's the thing, right? I was doing. I remember doing a boat show recently at Century Cove, and I was casting this reel and saying, "Look at this, everyone!" And I'd look the other way and cast this thing, and wouldn't even get an overrun. Well, it wasn't me; it was the reel doing all the work. But
after fishing with you for 20 years, I've seen an absolutely incredible improvement in your casting ability in recent times. Where the DC has surpassed your capabilities, which is I find it's amazing. Just shows you that a reel can make an amateur look good.
Absolutely, and you know what, Timmy, I politely agree with you, but also at the same time, I can admit that I have hooked you more times you've hooked me when we've been out fishing.
Yeah. Correct. I have scars to prove it. I have an ear piercing to prove it. I've been called hooked in the head many times. I do remember once
so
down
close
at,
to me.
Yeah. Well, even then, I can stand at the other end of the boat and still get hooked. So it doesn't really matter where I stand.
Again, that means you shouldn't be on the boat.
Maybe I need to go on someone else's boat more often. Maybe that's the key. I don't know.
Look, it's all good, mate. Hey, mate, thanks for your time, buddy. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and it's always lovely to have a chat with you. And I thought, the experiences that you and I have shared over the years, and I know it's been 20 or 30 years, been a hell of a long time, and a wild ride at most of them as well. And some of the adventures that we've done offshore, fishing the ocean blue for GTs and marlin and cobia and kingfish, is endless. And I'd love to talk to people about catching snapper on soft plastics, and we'll do that in the not too distant future. What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah, let's do it.
Love it. All for it. Hey, thanks for your time, Timmy. Appreciate it, mate.
No worries, mate. See you on the next boat trip, mate. We'll talk to you soon.
Mate, the crowd is going wild for you. There they go. Look at that.
Oh, there they are.
Yeah, there they are. They're back.
Yeah, that's more like it. That's better.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to another Step Outside podcast with myself and Fish Guy, Timmy Harris, all about runoffs. Hopefully that sort of information does help you out the next time that you venture and step outside. And, of course, if you want to find out more information on the localised fishing in your area and you want to supply yourself with some good quality gear, jump on down to your local Anaconda store. Till we meet again, take it easy. And as I always like to say, may your rods bend often.